Hey everyone, what's up? Welcome back. I got a brand new game to show you today. It's called Vaultbreakers. This is a hardcore top-down PvEvP ARPG. So the basic premise here is that the game blends MOBA-style characters in combat with large open maps full of points of interest, PvE camps with groups of enemies and bosses to fight. There's plenty of resources and loot for you to collect, along with the ever-persistent threat of PvP, as everything just mentioned has the extraction genre framework all layered on top of it. So last Friday, they kicked off a weeks-long playtest, which I've spent the past few days playing myself. The game is still clearly in early development, but I gotta say, I've really enjoyed what I've seen thus far. Combat is responsive and skill-based. Again, it feels a lot like playing a MOBA. There's lots of interesting PvE elements on top of that, with all these different points of interest and enemy camps to explore, and actually like full-on boss encounters with like different mechanics and stuff for you to pay attention to and dodge. There's layers upon layers of progression systems, and the PvP element also adds a nice level of tension to the entire thing. Yeah, I've been enjoying it myself. I thought some of you might find it interesting, so let's take a closer look at Vaultbreakers. All right, so I'm gonna start off with a simple high-level overview of what it's like playing the game. First order of business here is picking your character. There are currently 5 to choose from. These function pretty much exactly like what you'd expect from MOBA heroes, as an example. Each of them come with their own particular playstyles and a predetermined set of 4 active abilities. Very simply put, currently you have got your archer, tank, berserker, mage, and support archetypes to choose from. Then after making your choice and accepting a handful of initial quests in what is basically your town hub that you come to in between every match, after that you're going to queue up for your very first match, which starts on the game's beginner's map called Wolfswood. So your goal in every single match lines up with pretty much every other extraction game's ultimate objective. You want to go around collecting as much valuable loot and gear as possible, killing any other players you come across to take their stuff, and then trying to make sure that you get out alive before the timer reaches 0 and before you get killed by other players, or even by PvE, because actually, yes, the PvE in this game can legitimately be deadly. So you're going to start off spawning in at a random location somewhere on the outer perimeter of the map. And early on, you'll just pretty much want to do absolutely everything. You're going to want to kill every NPC you come across, open every crate and loot chest, harvest every resource you find, just pick up and do everything. Beyond any gear that you happen to collect, which makes you stronger, the game also has a ton of different avenues of power progression, and everything that you pick up from NPCs or in the environment is going to fuel this in one way or another. Now, as you continue playing, yes, you will eventually get to the point where you become more selective with what you're doing, where you're going, and the things you're choosing to fill your inventory with, but as a baseline starter suggestion, just clear the map as you move, essentially. So traveling through this starter map of Wolfswood, you're going to come across a variety of areas and points of interest. The first map is set in the woods, as the name would imply, and a lot of it is going to have you moving through like corridors that are lined with trees pretty much, in which you're going to come across a mix of different enemy NPC types. There's wildlife with things like wolves, bears, and spiders, along with a few different elementals. There's werewolves and these imp-like creatures that are called scrats. So every different enemy type actually, besides having their own unique look and attacks for you to learn, they also come with their own particular loot table, which again is something that with time you're going to learn what comes from where. So for example, bandits are often going to drop cloth, which can be used to make bandages and some of the caster gear, while spiders are going to drop their various bits and bops, which are used in many cases for crafting potions. There also does appear to be a wider loot table across all NPCs for things like gear dropping from pretty much everything, I believe. But yeah, once more early on, you're just going to move through the map, killing and collecting everything you come across, as you're going to need all of it for something that ties into your power progression, your leveling up, and your quest. And in that process, beyond moving through those trees and the farmlands, you're also going to come across a whole bunch of named points of interest. These include Web Hollow, which is this big cavern full of spiders and these mushrooms that explode in poisonous gas. Inside of here is also a large elite spider and a bunch of different loot chests. You got the Bandit Outpost, which has very large groups of both melee and range bandits to contend with, along with a roaming elite. Then there are the north, south, and eastern summoning circles, which are events where you bring this special item called a moonstone, placing it into the center altar will then start a ritual where you have to fend back waves of enemies. Doing so successfully gives you a nice reward. And then lastly, there are the Pinecrest Farm and Fields, which are full of these humanoids that will shapeshift into werewolves when they get to low health. And then beyond those points of interest and the woodland corridors that you travel through. The entire outer edge of the map actually has numerous additional areas that are all locked behind some sort of a gate. Now, opening these requires you to find or craft a rune of breaking, which is the single-use consumable key. This is very much worth it though, as all of these locked off areas are incredibly valuable, with a high density of enemies, tons of normal and rare chests, both of which can reward higher tier gear, and many of those points of interest also contain a singular named difficult boss, which drops some great rewards as well. And these fights can actually be seriously challenging. These are encounters with many different telegraphed attacks and area damage effects that you have to pay attention to and dodge, because getting hit by just a few is probably going to result in your death. Now, some of these outer locked off points of interest that I've explored so far include the Scrat Invasion, which is the sprawling imp camp, the Elemental Cave, as the name implies. This one is full of rock elementals, as well as these volcanic spouts for you to dodge. And then there's Pinecrest Village, which is home to the werewolves. And again, as mentioned, a lot of these come with a boss as well. So these points of interest, they're significantly more difficult than the ones that are found in the center of the map, the NPCs that you find there, but they're very much so worth it. However, beyond the added PvE dangers in these locations, the threat of PvP gets ramped up as well, because anytime someone in your lobby opens a gate to one of these areas, it alerts everyone else in the lobby, showing them exactly what gate was opened where, which in most cases results in other people showing up, bringing us to this game's player versus player. This is a constant threat because Vaultbreakers, beyond everything that I've just mentioned, is also a full-on PvP extraction game as well. If you see another player, odds are there is going to be a fight, or at the very least, one of you is going to run. Death in PvP has you dropping all of your equipped gear along with half of the items and resources in your inventory. You will take a random assortment of half of it out with you, but the rest of it you're going to drop. Point being though, if you kill someone, you can take any of the gear that they had equipped or was in their inventory, which makes the incentive to fight incredibly high. Especially the higher rarity gear comes with huge boost to your offensive and defensive capabilities. So in most instances, if player sees another player, they want to fight because they want the opportunity to get whatever potentially good gear they might be wearing. Now, as with pretty much any extraction game, Vaultbreakers requires you to really pay attention to your surroundings. Every single action, from character movement to the various elements of combat, it all comes with these distinct sounds, which you will be able to hear prior to an enemy actually being visible on your screen. In fact, footsteps alone are heard from quite far away, and if you choose, you can actually then decide, hey, do I want to go towards those footsteps to engage in PvP to potentially get their drops and their gear, or do I want to walk in the opposite direction? But if you choose to try to dodge the fight, you got to keep in mind there's the danger with this map being so full of PvE with so many dense enemy camps. You might just walk into a group of enemies, draw their aggro, and then you have to deal with them, which puts you at an extra disadvantage if the other player or groups of players were chasing you during that process. But yeah, I mean, at its core, all the stuff is here. All this PvE, ARPG, MOBA characters, collecting loot and resources, all that stuff is a part of the game, but everything is taken into consideration with its full PvP. You are in a lobby with other players who can and will probably attack you, and all of you are just trying to get out alive. So getting into fights with other people, it's a big part of this experience. Now, beyond the sounds the players make with their movement, their attack, and their spells, the game also has other indicators that will alert you to any adversarial location. So there are teleporters around the map, which will take you from one numbered marker to another, usually on the opposite edge of the map. Anytime any player activates one of these, you actually get a ringed highlight pulsating from that tower for a few seconds, showing you exactly which one was used. Then also scattered around the map are these small altars, which if interacted with will grant you increased move speed for 15 seconds. Similarly, anytime any player interacts with one of these, there is a map notification that pops up as well. You're also alerted anytime a player in your lobby starts one of those stone altar events, and these take a while to play out, so that gives you time to head towards them if you want to fight or if you want to steal the rewards that they were working towards. And as previously mentioned, anytime any player opens one of those gates to those highly valuable points of interest on the edges of the map, the whole lobby gets a notification as well, showing you exactly which gate was opened, which is important because every single POI actually has multiple potential entrances, and you're going to see exactly which one was opened by another player. So the PvE content alone, I've definitely found really interesting, but it's truly the case that if you don't like PvP, you realize you're going to be in for a tough time. Now, you could certainly play like one of the high mobility classes and just try to run away from any fights, but fighting other players, it is a big part of the experience that this game is delivering. So again, just keep that in mind. All right, so now let's talk about some more specifics about the different elements of this game besides the general gameplay overview. Starting out with maps, currently there are 2 maps available in the game. Everything I've been talking about so far has been the initial map that you're going to start out with and spend your first few hours playing, which is Wolf's Wood. Each of the maps are similar in that they are broken up into numerous named sections, like we highlighted in the previous examples, each of these coming with a particular mix of enemies, and then as you play once more, you learn what items and resources drop from these different NPCs and these different locations, which becomes very important for when you are needing them to complete quest or farming resources for your crafting. So yeah, so far we've been taking a look at the starter map. You're going to spend several hours here. This is Wolf's Wood. It's the woodland forest with the bandits, the werewolves, the elementals, and the variety of wildlife. You've got beyond the stone circle events that I mentioned, there's also this cool roaming lightning storm that takes place on the map. If you walk into it, you're going to actually get pushed around in different directions, and then there will be various large AoE spots that will explode after a few seconds that you have to avoid. But why you might want to go into this, like beyond forcing players out of locations, you might actually want to go in here because at the center of the storm is this large wind elemental NPC who's actually a vendor selling unique items. Pretty cool. So after you play for a bunch and you're leveling up your progression, you will eventually unlock the game's second currently available map, which is the Artifact Refinery. This is like an arid, cracky, rocky region, unlocked after you progress into questing and level up your account power level. This second map is noticeably more difficult than the first one. I've done a handful of matches on it now, and just from the PvE perspective alone, everything is more difficult. The enemies are deadlier. There's also way more environmental hazards, like there are these devices that shoot lasers. There's a huge train that rolls around on tracks that you don't want to get hit by. There are spots that have these massive clouds of expanding poison gas that you need to avoid. And then also all over the place are like these hidden landmines or these patches of tar that will slow you down, which isn't great if you're getting chased by PvE or PvP. But the trade-off of this increased difficulty across the board is that the loot drops and resources here are far more abundant and of a higher tier. You can get a bunch of the green and blue plus rarity items and resources on this map fairly easily. Now, those are the 2 that are in the current test. If you take a look at the world map, we can actually see that there are 3 additional locations planned for the future, which include the Titan Factory, Blood Swamp, and Emberwing. No clue what to expect, but I mean, these first 2 maps have a lot of similarities, so I'm assuming there will be some of those similarities carried over into these other maps as well. All right, so now let's talk about the characters. As mentioned, these are basically MOBA heroes with their set active abilities. There's 5 of them currently in the game. Each of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. First up is Bjornir. This is a melee tank, durable with lots of crowd control and a whole bunch of ice theming, as well as these cute little birds that help him cast spells. Sparkwing is a magic caster with great mobility and area damage. Nemera is a ranger who excels at single target damage, not so good at AoE. Lumiri is a ranged support class who applies shields and has various forms of zone controlling. And then Thora is your berserker, dual wielding axes, very durable and strong single target damage. So each character comes with a basic attack, 3 active skills on a shorter cooldown, and then an ultimate on a longer cooldown, which, as ultimates are, is more impactful, as well as a passive mechanic that is unique to that character. So the main character that I've been playing for the past few days has been basically the magic caster Sparkwing. Here's an overview of what the sort of tools and different things you can do look like. Sparkwing's passive mechanic is that his basic attack applies a debuff called Zap, and then his other abilities will be further modified if hitting a target that is affected by Zap. So my right click is Power Vortex, which creates an area that explodes after 1 second, dealing heavy magic damage. If you hit a Zap target, it then generates extra energy, which is a primary resource used for other things. Zap Bang throws a projectile that explodes in a cone upon hitting the first enemy, which deals some light magic damage, but more importantly will stun any targets that are zapped. Spark Flight is a movement skill. You dash forward, becoming immune, which means you can't be CC'd or damaged. This one deals physical damage and slows for 2 seconds, but each zapped target that gets hit reduces its cooldown by 4 seconds. So if you hit 3 zap targets, it brings your cooldown down to 2 seconds. If you hit 4 zap targets, it's instantly available once again. Great for AoE clearing. And then finally, the ultimate is Electric Form. This spawns 3 orbs that circle around you. However, for each 25 energy you have when you cast this, it will summon 1 additional orb. If you are full of energy, you are encircled by, I don't know the exact number, I think it's like 15 orbs. It's a huge number of orbs that you get fully encircled by, and that is ever expanding the longer it goes on. So this ability lasts for 15 seconds, and those orbs, any of them hit an enemy, they explode for magic damage. You get someone stunned and you throw a bunch of these out and they get hit by multiple orbs in a row. That's pretty much your burst GG in a lot of instances. Now, beyond their base capabilities, you can then further tailor characters via the game's numerous progression systems. And even in just this playtest, there's already quite a lot of these. So first, there's the fact that you will level your character. As you play and do things, you get XP, leveling them up, and in the process, you unlock a pool of passive perks to choose from. These are rather impactful. Now, currently on the character that I've been playing, Sparkwing, there are 13 total passives for me to choose from, of which you can have 4 active at any time. And to just give you an example, here are the 4 passives that I'm using. First is Dragon Dance, which makes it so that my basic attack reduces the cooldown of my AoE damage dealer, Power Vortex. This is very, very good because it means that I can basically alternate spamming basic attacks and Power Vortex on top of everything else that I'm doing. My second passive, Exploding Dragons, makes it so that my movement skill, Spark Flight, will deal extra magic damage when at the spot that I land. Then I've got To the Knee, which further modifies Spark Flight so that it slows enemies more than they're already slowed, and then also adds a damage over time to any one hit. And then finally, Stormcaller, whenever I cast a spell, it calls down a lightning strike to a random nearby enemy, and that lightning strike applies the zap debuff. Lots of synergies. Again, just think like playing a MOBA. Lots of synergies between your different effects and using them in proper order, setting up combos, setting it up so that you've got everything lined up to do a massive burst of damage after you've CC'd a target. In most instances, that's the general playstyle, especially in PvP. You're trying to get yourself set up to do as much damage as quickly as possible, locking down a target and then blowing them up, basically. But that's not all. There's way more than just passive perks. Again, you will find and craft gear. This is really big. It comes in a variety of types as well as rarities, and these will be tailored to different playstyles. You got gear that makes you tank gear, increasing your health and resistances. You got gear that increases your physical damage, stuff that adds crit damage. You've got magic boosting gear, as well as even gear for boss hunting. There are gear sets where making you do like 50% increased damage to any bosses. That'll put you at a disadvantage in PvP, but if you get into a map, if you open up one of those gates, if you hunt one of those bosses, you could take them down quickly, get yourself out of there. Great. There's also account-wide power progression in this artifact system, which grants passive bonuses like getting 3 healing potions at the start of every match, finding healing orbs that restore HP up to 25%. You can get bonus defensives against enemy NPCs, and there's one that grants 3 wards at the start of every match, and these wards are vision wards, like very similar to how they work in MOBAs as well. Then there's a whole series of quests. You're going to pick up quests from the various NPCs in town. Completing these will level them up, which unlocks new crafting recipes at the various shops and vendors in that whole process. So the different vendors that this works with is there's Lylel, an item slot vendor, which unlocks additional ring, artifact, and trinket slots for your character. Completing quests for Silveric Sam increases your storage space in town. Lanithir unlocks environmental things like these special mushrooms to let you leap far in any one direction. Gondrak is a blacksmith, which will unlock crafting recipes for making gear and weapons. Vexy's an alchemist with potion recipes. Volcarin is a special items vendor. You can purchase some higher tier rarity items here for gold. And then there's a basic general goods vendor called Goldbelly. And then one additional layer of progression is these challenges, sort of similar to quests. They say like, hey, complete X objective, get a reward, but this is on its very own separate track and rewards a variety of currency, resources, and items. Okay, so there you have it. That is the basic overview of Vaultbreakers. Now some of my initial thoughts on the game. Generally, like I said, I've been liking it. It's the whole reason I'm making this video. I don't really tend to cover games I'm not that interested or don't like. But yes, I've been enjoying Vaultbreakers from this early playtest. Top of the list is I think the gameplay just feels really good. It really plays just like a MOBA. It is very responsive and has a lot of room for skill expression. As I talked about a moment ago, it's really all about lining up your cooldowns and trying to properly land skill shots, controlling enemies and then blowing them up, placing your ground target abilities, saving your movement skill for the proper timing, as most, if not all, of the classes have a movement skill that makes you immune for a small duration. So that has you avoiding heavy hitting damage attacks or CC that might be incoming. And spacing, it seems pretty much huge for everyone. Now, every single character is going to have their own ideal spacing, and their own ideal spacing depending on who they're fighting against or the multiple characters that they're fighting against. All of that. Again, just think about playing a MOBA. That's basically what the PvP and even the PvE combat is like in this game. As we went over, there's already a lot of progression and stuff to work towards, both on the account and the character-based level. I like the fact that they've got these different maps, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else comes in the future. And I also like that this isn't really just a PvP game, as there's loads of varied PvE opponents with all those points of interest, all the different enemy types, and you've got to learn how they attack to try to avoid the damage. You've got the big boss battles as well, and I've only seen a handful of them in the few days that I've played. Seems like there's a lot more than the couple that I've seen thus far. As for my points of feedback, there's a few things over the past few days that have stood out thus far. Dealing with some random crashes, all of a sudden the client will just freeze up and I'll crash the desktop. Now, also, one of my friends has been dealing with actually getting blue screened, which isn't something that happens to them on a regular basis. It's something about this game has blue screened them multiple times in the afternoon that I was playing with them, so that sucks. Hopefully they figure out what's going on there. But then also with the random crashes and or the blue screening, as of now, there's no opportunity to rejoin a match if either of those things happen to you. Or even if you're not crashing or blue screening, if you get disconnected, there's no way to rejoin. What happens is your character just instantly dies if you disconnect from the match. That sucks. They should have a rejoin option. You should phase out of existence, and then if you get back within a set time frame, say it's a minute or 2 minutes or however long, you should just reappear where you were, right? That'd be nice if they did that. Especially, like, it's one thing if it's a disconnect issue, but with people crashing and blue screening, there should be a match rejoin so you don't lose half your resources and all of your gear because of something that's the game's fault, right? One big glaring pain point right now is the fact that there's no shared stash, and I'll tell you how this played out. I started out the first couple of hours, I was playing the range support shielding character, the elf lady who applies shields and has zone control, and I was having fun, but I wanted to try some of the other characters, so I swapped over to one of the melee characters, and I realized everything that I had saved up, all my gear, but also everything in the stash that's in town, it wasn't shared. They're character specific. The reason this is a problem isn't so much because you lose the resources and or the gear on your new character. It's that like all of the progression is locked behind turning in resources, turning in items, or spending gold, which is also character specific. So everything that works towards your larger scale account progression of you going through the main story quest, which unlocks new abilities and unlocks new NPCs, but then leveling up those NPCs, which unlocks crafting recipes, all of that is locked behind you turning in money, items, or resources. So the fact that those are locked to a character, it means they're basically disincentivizing trying any other characters, or else you're going to put a hard stop on your account progression. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was playing for a few hours. I was accumulating a bunch of stuff. I was making my way through progressing, leveling up the NPCs, going through the main story quests. I swapped characters. I had nothing. So I had to regrind all of that stuff, working towards completing those quests and progressing the account all over again from scratch, just because I wanted to try a different character. I get it if the character power gets reset and maybe you can't trade gear between characters, but the stash locking the currency and the resources and making you basically start over in your progression. You don't have to start your quest over, but you start over in what you've been gathering because you can't transfer it. It just sucks. There should be some form of a shared stash, even if it is just for currency and resources. If you don't want me to change gear, if you don't want me to make a new character and equip him straight away with blue or purple gear, fine. But the resources and the currency that's tied directly into progression, that should be shared in my opinion. Also right now, there doesn't appear to be separate queues for the different team sizes. It's basically a duos game, but you can queue in solo. Now, the interesting thing is that while you play solo, you get a buff that is pretty darn strong. It gives you like 500 extra HP and like plus 10 or plus 10% to a lot of your stats, as well as 10 extra item power. So it does make you really strong, and I've won many 1vx's playing this game, no question about it. But I think I would just prefer if they didn't have this solo player gets a buff and then the duo players. I just wish they had different lobbies. Like from what I can tell, the map lobby size is pretty small in my experience. I don't know the exact number of players that are in any given match, but I want to say it is 10 or less people per map. From my experience, it seems like that's about the number. Maybe it's as high as 15, but honestly, I think it's like 10 or less the number of people in any given match, from just like how often I'm coming across people and the number of things I'm seeing going on as people start events events and the people showing up in the death log when somebody dies to PvE or to other players. So the point is, the match sizes seem pretty small that I feel like they could get away with having a solo queue and a duo queue and them being in separate hoppers, but who knows. And then my final point of feedback, but not really, is that there's a lot missing in the game. But of course there is, because it's still in development. I'm previewing a playtest of a game. This isn't even like an ongoing persistent alpha or beta. It's a week-long playtest. So we expect there to be a lot missing, but I just, again, want to mention it. It's not unexpected, but I wanted to say it out loud anyways. Okay, so there you have it. That is an early look at Vaultbreakers. As I said at the top, they've got a playtest running this week. It began on January 31st, and as far as I'm aware, it will be ending on Friday, February 7th. So if you see this video on the day it comes out, you got a few more days to hop in and check it out if you like. Now, as of right now, for the future, the next round of testing is currently scheduled to begin on April 9th, which is a few months away. Seems actually further than I would expect. I wonder if maybe, depending on how the reception is to this first test, if maybe they have another test that comes sooner. But as of today, their next test, yes, it's scheduled for April the 9th. I should add as well that the game currently has no set release date at this moment. I will say though, it already seems fleshed out enough that I think it's possible they get a 2025 launch, but this is pure conjecture. No official statement has been made. I'm just saying, I think it's already in a pretty good state, but honestly, don't rush it, right? Like, by all means, add more content. They've still got those 3 more maps that are planned. I'm assuming they've got a bunch more characters planned. We at least see placeholder slots for 3 more. So keep working on the game, keep polishing it, keep fine-tuning it. But as a baseline, I gotta say, I've enjoyed it. Like, I've had a lot of fun these past few days. Certainly a good foundation, and I will be keeping an eye on this game and seeing how it progresses in the future. But that is all for today. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you liked this early look at Vaultbreakers. And yeah, see you in the next one. Take it easy, guys.